We're less than 10 days until the MLB opening day where the Phillies' official start to the season begins, and we officially know who will be taking the bump. As if there was any clarity needed, Zack Wheeler is officially scheduled to start opening day for this Phillies team as they start their journey for contending for the World Series. I'm going to take a little bit of a look at Zack Wheeler, specifically expectations for him and the rest of the pitching staff this year, as I do feel like Zack Wheeler is sometimes a guy who flies under the radar. A rare breed in this modern MLB of a guy who is still a true ace on the mound, who will be out there doing his thing as often as you need him, and a guy that delivers every time the moment asks there. Now, going to dive into each of that. Before I get to it, do want to remind you guys, make sure you are smashing the subscribe button here, that at this point in time, 67.1% of you guys watching these videos have not subscribed to the channels just yet, so come be a part of the Phillies Digest family. This is the perfect time to get on board as we get ready to kick this season off. Now, we're going to take a quick break to take a word from our sponsor and get right back to talking some Zack Wheeler. We are kicking off a March Madness pool for the channel by partnering with the Hot Takes app and other Digest channels for this event. It is completely free to sign up. Just download the Hot Takes app, click the March Madness banner at the top, and under groups select the Digest Media Pool. This is really exciting as there's over $25,000 in prizes to be won, and since there's a much smaller pool of people participating, there's a real chance in winning big compared to other bracket challenges out there. Check out the link below or scan the QR code to download the app, and make sure to use promo code DIGEST in all caps to get exclusive perks when signing on. Again, this is completely free, and if you have any issues whatsoever, just use the email down below. We are excited to see you in this March Madness pool. Now let's get into the topic of the video today. So make sure to get involved. That a little something to tide you over until the baseball season fully kicks off here. I'll be participating myself, so make sure to compete right against me, and we'll see who's cutting down the nets. Now, to talk some Zack Wheeler, first want to start off with the official tweet from the Phillies here saying, "We rolling with wheels on opening day." Again, not something that is a huge surprise here for Wheeler, specifically to reflect on what he brought to the table last season. Pitched in 32 games, 200 innings exactly there, 224 strikeouts across that time, just 20 home runs allowed, 139 hits. That is pretty ridiculous numbers there. 6.3 hits per 9 inning, 2.57 ERA, and a .955 whip here, which led the entire MLB, by the way. This is a guy who is a Cy Young candidate on a pretty much perennial basis, year in and year out to this point. Really disappointing he hasn't got over the hump and received that honor yet, but do want to talk a little bit about his outlook for this year. So do want to pull up this article from Phillies Nation here that writes about kind of the outlook for the pitchers. So to start off with, it writes, "The Phillies have the best rotation in baseball." I know we've had this conversation a lot. The Dodgers make a strong case, and I do kind of concede to that argument for the time being, but health and availability is really the deciding factor, and for this Phillies team specifically, got to give him some credit for that. A guy like Wheeler specifically, the horse that he is, a guy like Aaron Nola, the guy who's there on such a regular basis, that really is a rarity when looking around the major leagues and seeing some of these other top pitching stuff, that injuries pop up all over the place, more so than ever it feels, and it is nice that the Phillies have had the benefit of that. Hopefully, knock on wood, that trend continues into this season, but to continue on with the article here. That's difficult for someone superstitious to say, but it's not a hot take. It's the objective truth. The rotation was the Phillies' biggest strength in 2024, and heading into 2025, it only gotten better with the upgrade from Taijuan Walker to Jesus Luzardo. Of course, there are always going to be concerns, but this is by far the most complete rotation the Phillies have had since the 2011 four aces. And I do wholeheartedly agree with this take here, that if you want one driving reason why this team could be different from the teams that have come up short in past years, I do think it is the pitching staff. That I think that is the organizational slant and sway that is occurring, that they are investing more in the pitching side of things, kind of shifting away from this, we got to outscore teams, we got to mash home runs. It does feel like pitching is the pure focus. I know I've talked about that a lot, but definitely seeing that come to fruition. And it starts off with Zack Wheeler saying, "Zack Wheeler has blossomed into a perennial Cy Young Award finalist, and there hasn't been anything so far to make this year look any different. Will this be the year that he finally earns the honor? Though there will always be doubters," looking at you, David Brandt. Wheeler is at his best is rivaled by only a few pitchers in baseball. I have full faith that his time to shine will come soon enough. Continues on to write a little bit Aaron Nola, saying Aaron Nola has established himself as one of the most reliable and durable starting pitchers over the course of his career. In fact, a recent in-game interview said he was grateful for his early career at Tommy John since it led to increased durability later in his career. Nola is only the returning starter who did not make an all-star roster last year, though not for lack of merit. And for Nola specifically, I do think he's a guy who gets a little bit underappreciated in the larger scale. There's certainly the people that fight the good fight and stick up for Nola as well, and it can be maddening as a pitcher for times. There does tend to be that one inning that he has, that blow-up inning, or the random game in which he does not have it. But in the large part of what he brings to his team, shout out to Aaron Nola, man. A homegrown talent, a guy they've invested in, a guy that's flourished into a very good pitcher there. So do think Nola deserves his credit there. Now to continue on part 2 of the pitching staff, starts off with Ranger Suarez, saying Suarez missed a month with an injury last year, but still performed well enough to earn his first All-Star nomination. Entering into a very important contract year, he certainly has enough motivation to keep pushing forward. Health, of course, will be the biggest factor in 2025. And frankly, I think this is painting Ranger in a little bit more positive light than he deserves for last season. I am the #1 Ranger Suarez guy in the world. Do love him, watching him pitch for this Phillies team, so don't mean to be Mr. Negative here. But for Rangers specifically, it was pretty night and day difference for what we saw at the start of last season and what we saw at the tail end of it. At the start of the season, he looked like one of the best pitchers in baseball. He was a rightful all-star, a guy that was every bit of the conversations for the best pitchers across the entire league. In the second half, kind of dropped off a cliff there. I felt when watching him in the second half of the season, he was pitching with a dead arm, that it didn't feel like he had the same control, the same kind of bite with it coming out as was the case earlier on in the season. Ultimately, and this was what we will judge him on, Ranger gutted down and performed in the playoffs when it mattered. That he did do his job for this Phillies team. He was not the reason that they ultimately did not go deep in the playoffs or win that series against the Mets there. He served his purpose and did his job, and that is why I will continue to be a Ranger Suarez backer here. But I do think it will be interesting to see how he comes out of gates this year. Encouraging signs from what has been seen in spring training, but obviously the real action is the real action, and that is what will matter. Now, to continue on, Christopher Sanchez had a huge breakout season in 2024, also earning his first All-Star honors, and so far this spring looks to be even better. He's added muscle over the winter, which has boosted his sinker and fastball. The added velocity only makes his changeup, which already was one of the best, even more effective. And this is a guy who I think could have, I don't want to get too bold here, but I do think there's a world in which the dust settles and we zoom forward 2 years from now that we're talking about Christopher Sanchez like a potential ace. The movement on his sinker specifically, and really just every pitch that he throws, it feels like there's more bite this year. The miles per hour is up, the velocity is up, everything looks better coming out of Christopher Sanchez right now. And again, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, as we will judge when it is the regular season, when he's pitching in Citizens Bank Park against real hitters. And obviously we've seen some of this in the scrimmages and all that kind of conversations. But the point being here, Christopher Sanchez has done everything you could have asked from him this offseason, this spring training, and now it's time for him to perform in the real thing when the season's starting. Now, Jesus Luzardo, probably the biggest X factor here. And the article writes that Jesus Luzardo is new to this rotation, but is already a welcomed upgrade from the 5th spot last year. The great thing about this pitching staff is that the Phillies don't need Luzardo to be exceptional. He doesn't even have to be above average. As long as the rest of the rotation stays healthy and does what they're capable of, all they need from Luzardo is 6 innings consistently. The biggest concern will be his health, since he was shut down after only 12 games last season because of injury. Should he remain healthy and look even close to his 2023 season, he'll be more than capable of giving what the Phillies need from him. Now, when we get to the postseason conversation, it'll be interesting what the shakeup is, and I do want to throw Andrew Painter in the mix here, as that is a looming presence that could certainly be added to the rotation at any given point in the season. They obviously will going to have to make some tough decisions for who are the guys you throw in that mix. But that's a great problem to have, and you have an entire 162 regular season grind to get through before you even are at that point in the game here. Now, for Luzardo specifically, I love that the Phillies brought him in. I need to see a little something that I'm not as sold on him as I think probably the consensus is. I know my guy Luke Arcani, my co-host on the channel, is running, leading the charge on the Jesus Luzardo bandwagon. I'm not there yet, but all I really need out of that 5th starting spot is a guy who can be serviceable. The reality is, and what my frustration for was last year, as we shuffled through the Tyler Phillips of the world and the Taijuan Walker experience over and over, and everybody else, that there was an attempt there. What was frustrating that about me was just how much it wore out the rest of the roster. It puts an incredible amount of pressure on Zack Wheeler, on Aaron Nola, on Christopher Sanchez, and on the bullpen for having to pick up their slack there when that is your every 5-game rotation. That is your only option, a guy that you just know is going to get hit around here. As much as it obviously is helpful to get a direct upgrade here and a guy that can perform, I think more of like the detrimental effects on this Phillies team was the wear and tear that not having a solidified 5th option kind of sprayed out to the rest of the roster there. That is what I hope is caused this year. So even if Luzardo doesn't look like the best version of himself or the 2023 version of himself or the potential all-star that he has teased to be for short stretches here, they should welcome that as an overall upgrade, that you at least have some sort of security and know what you're getting on a game-by-game basis there. So ultimately, the cards will settle as they may, but very excited that Zack Wheeler is going to be the guy that continues to get things started for this Phillies team. So as always, do want to remind you guys one more time to make sure you are hitting